trying to convince somebody, sometimes you're trying to convince them that what you think is true really is true. Other times, you're trying to convince somebody of something, but you're only trying to convince them that something is probable, not true. And these two kinds of conclusions give us different kinds of arguments. A deductive argument tries to get at the truth from the premises, and a non-deductive argument tries to get at what's probable from the premises. What's called a deductive argument is the kind of argument that is trying to get at the truth. And a good deductive argument we call valid. However, a strong argument is what we call a good non-deductive argument. Non-deductive arguments are not trying to get at truth. They're trying to get at what is most likely or what's more probably true given the premises. So you can think about it this way. Non-deductive versus deductive, they have different goals. Let's focus on the deductive arguments, the ones that are trying to be valid, the ones that want to have true premises and lead to a true conclusion. For a deductive argument, if the premises are all true, then the conclusion is necessarily true. When an argument is trying to be a deductive argument, we're looking for a true conclusion that necessarily follows from true premises. The valid argument says, if all of the premises are true, then the conclusion will be true. It's a valid argument to say, if Obama is Persian, then there was a U.S. president who was Persian. The second premise is that Obama is Persian. So, there was a U.S. president who was Persian. This is a valid argument because the conclusion is necessarily true if the premises are true. It turns out that second premise, Obama is Persian, is false. So that hypothetical conditional, which is the first premise, that if Obama were Persian, we would have had a Persian president in America, is false as well. But that doesn't mean this isn't a valid argument. This is still following the rules of logic. If you have a cookie cutter shaped into a heart or a circle, let's say a circle, you take that cookie cutter and you put it on dough, on flour that's been rolled, on mortar or concrete, on marshmallow or gum, you'll get a circle. No matter what you do, because you use that form, that circular form of the cookie cutter. The material you're using doesn't matter. Analogously, logical deductive arguments have forms. And whatever content you put in, whatever information, whatever you're arguing about, so long as you appropriately use the valid argument form, you will always get a valid argument. Let's strip the information that's in this argument. Instead of saying Obama is Persian, I'm just going to say P, just the letter P. Instead of saying that a Persian person was president of the United States, I'm just going to use the letter Q. P and Q will just be variables. So I'm going to read it. If P, then Q. Premise 2 is P. The conclusion is Q. This valid argument follows the form called modus ponens. You can plug any information, like Obama being Persian, anything, into modus ponens, so long as you do it correctly. If P, then Q. Premise 2 would be P, and the conclusion is Q. Now let's go in the reverse order. Let's take the logical argument form of modus ponens, and instead of stripping content, let's add content. So let's say what P represents, and let's say what Q represents. In this next example, allow P to represent that somebody cheated, and allow Q to represent that somebody failed. As you use the content to fill in the form, mind your P's and Q's. In other words, make sure that you remain consistent. And in doing so, you will get the following valid argument. If someone cheated, then they should fail. Premise 2, Sam is someone who cheated. Conclusion, Sam is someone who should fail. When we're considering whether the argument is valid or not, the argument about Sam needing to fail since he cheated is equally as valid as the argument that there was a U.S. president who was Persian if Obama was Persian. These two are equal, valid, deductive arguments. Now, here is a third. Whoever hits animals should be punished. Duke hits animals, therefore Duke should be punished. All three of these arguments are equally valid. They all perfectly fit modus ponens. I should add that a deductive argument can be valid. It wants to be valid. A deductive argument also can be sound. The ideal deductive argument is both valid and sound. A sound argument is an argument that has true premises. So if it's valid and sound, then it has true premises and its conclusion is necessarily true as well. So for these three arguments that we've just considered, we know that they're valid because they fit the valid argument form of modus ponens. To see if they're sound, we need to test their premises. We need to see if the conclusions rest on true premises. And if they do, then it's also sound. Now, without further information, we can't prove that any of these are sound in addition to being valid. For this one, we have to figure out if people who cheat should fail. We have to figure out if Sam cheated. If both of those things are true, then it's valid and sound. For this one, we have to find out if people who hit animals should be punished. We need to find out if Duke hit animals. If both of those are true, then it's valid and sound. We have to find out if Obama is Persian. And if we do that, we can see whether this is sound. But all three of them are nonetheless valid. Just like modus ponens, a disjunctive syllogism is a valid argument form. It has two premises that leads to a conclusion as well, although this is just in its most simple form. Premise 1 says either A or B. Premise 2 says not A, and so the conclusion is that B. Now A and B, as long as you mind your A's and B's, can be plugged in with any content and it'll still be a valid argument. The only way to prove the conclusion of this argument false is to show that one or both of the premises are false. And even then, it'll be a valid argument that's not sound. Valid arguments are the point of deductive arguments. They aim at the truth. They want to get a true conclusion that follows from true premises.